Have you ever noticed that the day the money hits your account is supposed to bring relief, but almost never brings real peace? It feels automatic to think, the money's in, now I can breathe. But if you're the kind of person who ends every month at zero, that thought is a little too comforting. And that's exactly where the problem starts. It feels normal, but it isn't. Almost no one realizes this, but payday doesn't activate safety in your brain. It activates permission to relax, to lower your guard, to make decisions that just a few days later wouldn't make as much sense. What happens is subtle. The salary comes in, the tension fades, and with it goes an important part of your self-control. Your brain reads that money as space, even when every dollar already has a job. Bills, obligations, they're still there. But emotionally, they feel far away. And this is where the game starts to change. Because the real danger isn't at the end of the month when the money runs out. The danger is at the beginning when it arrives. Have you felt that before? That quiet sense of, now I can, followed by small, almost invisible choices that feel harmless in the moment. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because your salary may not be fixing anything. And without you noticing, it could actually be making your decisions worse, exactly when you think everything is under control. If this feels familiar, stay with me. And maybe the most curious part of all this is realizing how almost no one talks about this side of it. People discuss budgets, spreadsheets, side income, but very rarely does anyone stop to look at what happens inside your head on the exact day your paycheck comes in. It's a quiet spot, a slightly uncomfortable one to face because it touches habits, identity, and that feeling of, I deserve this, after a long, heavy month. If, while you're listening, a similar moment comes to mind, a purchase that felt too small to matter but later made a difference, it's worth leaving that here in the comments. Sometimes putting it into words helps you see the pattern more clearly, and you realize you're not the only one going through it. And if this kind of conversation makes you think about money in a different way, a like here isn't just a mindless tap. It helps this content reach other people who are stuck in the same cycle and think the problem is simply a lack of discipline. Subscribing to the channel becomes a way of saying, this conversation matters to me. I want to understand this better. Because from here on, we start looking more closely at the exact moment the money arrives and how small decisions, made almost without noticing, begin to shape the rest of the month. What almost no one realizes is that on payday, your brain isn't doing math. It's telling a story, a quiet story of permission. The money comes in, and with it comes a strange sense of space, as if something has been resolved, even when nothing has truly changed. The bills are still there, the obligations are the same, but emotionally it feels lighter. And it's at this exact point that decisions begin to shift. They don't get bigger, they get looser, easier to justify. That feels normal, but it isn't. Your paycheck works like an emotional reset, not a rational one, an emotional one. It signals to your brain that the hard part is over, even if it's only been postponed. That's why, on this day, choices appear that don't show up during the rest of the month. An extra expense here, a small upgrade there, a concession that won't really make a difference. On their own, none of them seem serious. The problem is the combination, because these decisions aren't being made from planning, they're being made from relief. And decisions made from relief almost always ignore future impact. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because this is where a hidden truth comes in that completely changes how you see this cycle. This isn't a lack of discipline. It isn't financial laziness. It's a predictable mental pattern repeated by people who always end the month at zero. Your brain associates newly arrived money with immediate safety, and immediate safety lowers vigilance. The real game happens behind the scenes of the mind. While you think you're more in control, you're actually more permissive, and that directly affects your financial journey because it doesn't just change how much you spend, but how you decide to spend it. This is a silent shift in mindset, a small, almost invisible detail that starts shaping the entire month before you even notice. If this hits somewhere inside, leave a comment saying, "This makes sense to me." There's a type of spending that almost never comes up when we try to explain why money disappears so quickly. It doesn't draw attention, it doesn't come with immediate guilt, and because of that, it slips right past us. The most expensive spending isn't the big, planned, obvious kind. It's the automatic kind, the kind that only shows up on payday. And when you start observing this more honestly, something shifts. Because you realize it's not about extravagance, it's about emotional timing. On the day your paycheck comes in, choices appear that simply don't exist during the rest of the month. A just this once upgrade, a well-deserved reward, a slightly better version of something that would normally be simpler. None of it feels excessive. In fact, it all comes wrapped in reasonable justifications. The problem is that these decisions aren't born from necessity. They're born from relief. Your brain switches into early reward mode. It starts spending today the sense of calm that was meant to carry you through the coming days. Now I want to go even deeper into this, and because this is where a revelation comes in that completely changes how this behavior makes sense. These aren't isolated decisions. They're a ritual, a pattern that repeats month after month, almost always at the same moment, with the same internal excuses. The impact doesn't come from one specific purchase, but from their silent accumulation. Each small concession feels harmless, but together they create a domino effect that pushes the entire month toward scarcity. And the most uncomfortable part is realizing that all of this happens quietly, behind the scenes of the mind. There's no sense of making a mistake at the moment of the decision. Only later comes that strange feeling that the money didn't last as long as it should have. Not because something suddenly spun out of control, but because control was relaxed at the exact moment it felt strongest. That's the hidden truth of this cycle. Your salary doesn't slowly disappear. It gets committed early by choices that feel far too normal to question. When you look at this pattern more closely, it becomes clear that people who always end up at zero aren't failing at math. They're living inside an unresolved emotional cycle. The paycheck stops being a neutral tool and turns into an event loaded with meaning. It's not just money coming in. It's a psychological pause, a symbolic breath after weeks of pressure. And that changes everything. Because in that moment, the brain isn't thinking about building, it's chasing a feeling of normalcy, of belonging, of finally being able to lower your guard for a few moments. That's why so many people aren't trying to build wealth on payday. They're trying to feel like everyone else. They're trying to experience a bit of mental relief, that sense that life is back on track, even if only for a few days. That's deeply human, and recognizing it isn't an accusation, it's a revelation. The hidden truth is that money starts carrying the job of easing accumulated emotions. It becomes compensation, not planning, and while all of this happens quietly in the background, the cycle keeps repeating with almost no resistance. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because here comes the shift that almost no one is willing to face. As long as payday is treated like liberation, it will always come at a cost, not necessarily in the amount spent, but in the impact it leaves across the month. The liberation is temporary, but the emotional bill shows up later, when that sense of control fades far too quickly. And then the script repeats itself. Frustration, promises to change, waiting for the next paycheck. Not because there's no desire to do better, but because the mindset still links money to immediate relief. This journey is quiet. There's no external villain, no obvious mistake, just decisions shaped by old emotions, repeated automatically, month after month. When you see this clearly, something begins to shift inside, because the problem was never only how much comes in or goes out, it was the role your paycheck took on in your life. There's one detail that changes everything, and almost no one notices it because it happens so fast. The problem isn't how much you earn, the size of your paycheck, or the number that shows up in your account. The decisive point is in the first few hours after the money comes in. It's there, in that seemingly harmless window, that the entire month starts to take shape. Before any bill is paid, before any official spending happens, your brain has already made quiet decisions about how that money will be treated, and those decisions are rarely conscious. Payday concentrates choices that feel too small to matter, yet carry a disproportionate impact. It's in that moment that you decide without realizing it whether money will be handled with attention or consumed as relief. What's interesting is that almost no one connects this beginning to the end of the month. When the balance gets tight, it feels like something went wrong later on, but the hidden truth is that, most of the time, the fate of the paycheck was set long before that. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because there's a specific point on this day that works like a key, a nearly invisible shift in mindset that has nothing to do with cutting spending or depriving yourself of everything, but with interrupting the automatic before it takes over. This point separates people who feel money slipping through their fingers from those who start realizing they can guide their financial journey with more clarity. It's not a dramatic turning point, it's a subtle change, made early enough to seem unimportant, but decisive. Enough to be impossible to ignore. When this realization starts to click, a strange sense of clarity shows up, as if the problem finally has a name and a place. It's not the full solution yet, but it's the first real step out of the cycle. If you made it this far, it's because this conversation touched something real. This wasn't just about money coming in or going out of your account. It was about quiet decisions, about mindset, about the behind-the-scenes patterns that almost no one sees, but that end up shaping the rest of the month. When you start looking at this more clearly, your relationship with money shifts from pure control to understanding, and that kind of understanding doesn't happen all at once. It's built step by step, conversation by conversation. If this message resonated with you, leave something simple in the comments just to mark that you stayed until the end. You can write, "This message was for me," or "I'm with you until the end." Those comments create a space where other people recognize themselves and realize they're not alone in this journey. And if this video helped you see Payday in a different light, a like here is simply a quiet way to keep this kind of conversation alive on the platform. Subscribing to the channel becomes a natural way to continue down this path, to follow more reflections that help organize not just money, but the way we make decisions. There's a video right here that connects directly with this topic. Click it and keep going with me there.